I was not supposed to be home that night, but something pulled me back early. And what I found when I arrived changed everything, forever. Welcome back to the channel. Grab your coffee, get comfortable, and remember, the people in these stories had every opportunity to play it straight. They had every chance to walk away clean. They just chose the hard way. Drop a comment to let us know where you're watching from, and make sure you subscribe. You are going to want to stay for this one. My name is Thomas. I am 54 years old, and for most of those years, the most important thing in my life has fit into one simple word: family. I grew up in a modest house in a small town where everybody knew everybody and nobody had very much, but nobody needed very much either. My father was a carpenter. My mother ran the house and somehow made it feel like the warmest place on earth. They were not complicated people. They worked hard, they kept their promises, and they loved us without condition. I tried to carry that into my own life. I married my wife, Ellen, when I was 27. She was a schoolteacher with a quiet laugh and an honest heart. We had one daughter together, Grace, and I think both Ellen and I understood from the very beginning that Grace was something rare. She was kind in a way that did not come from being told to be kind. She was just born with it. A gentleness in her that you could feel when she walked into a room. Ellen passed away when Grace was just 15 years old. A sudden illness. The kind that gives you no real warning and no real time. One month, we were a family sitting at a dinner table together, and the next month, I was a father sitting alone, trying to figure out how to hold everything together for a teenage girl who had just lost her mother. Those years were hard. I will not pretend they were not. But Grace and I held on to each other. We learned to cook together, badly at first. We watched films on Friday evenings. We talked about Ellen often, about her laugh, about the way she used to fold napkins into little shapes at the dinner table. We kept her alive in our conversations, and I think that helped both of us more than anything else could have. Grace grew up to be a remarkable young woman. She studied nursing, which surprised no one who knew her. She was the kind of person who was always drawn toward caring for others. She qualified at 23 and started working at the local hospital, and I remember the pride I felt watching her leave for her first shift in her uniform. I had to go inside quickly so she would not see me crying on the front step. When Grace was 26, she met a man named Kevin. Kevin was polished. That is the best word I have for him. Polished in the way that some people are, smooth on the surface, good with words, always saying the right thing at the right moment. He dressed well. He spoke confidently. He had a good job in finance and a smile that arrived quickly and left just as quickly. I shook his hand the first time we met, and I smiled. But something in me, that same quiet, unnamed feeling, sat very still. I did not say anything. Grace loved him, and Grace's happiness was something I had protected for a long time, through very difficult years. I was not going to cast shadows on it because of a feeling I could not explain. They married 18 months later. I gave her away at the altar with a full heart and a quiet prayer. After the wedding, I stepped back. That was a deliberate choice. I had seen enough fathers who could not let go, who called too often, who turned up without warning, who made their married children feel watched. I did not want to be that man. I visited when I was invited. I called on Sundays. I sent messages that did not demand replies. But slowly, over the first year of their marriage, I began to notice things. Grace's Sunday calls became shorter. Not dramatically shorter, just a few minutes less each week. She sounded fine when we spoke. She laughed at the right moments. She asked about my work, about my health. But there was something behind the words that was not quite right. Something slightly careful. I told myself I was imagining it. Then I noticed she had stopped mentioning Kevin in our conversations. Early on, she used to talk about him naturally. Kevin and I went here, Kevin said this, Kevin thinks that. It was the normal way a newlywed speaks about their partner. Easy and constant. But that stopped. And in its place was a kind of silence around his name that I noticed, but did not push on. I visited them at their home one Saturday afternoon, about 8 months after the wedding. Kevin opened the door. He smiled. He shook my hand. He offered me a drink and talked about his work for 15 minutes with great enthusiasm. Grace sat beside me on the sofa and was quieter than usual. I watched her face when Kevin spoke. I watched the way she held her cup, the way her eyes stayed on the middle distance rather than on either of us. When Kevin left the room to take a phone call, I touched her hand gently and said, "Are you all right, love?" She looked at me for a moment, just a moment. And in that moment, I saw something that no father ever wants to see in his child's eyes. Then she smiled. She said, "Of course, Dad. I'm just tired." Long week at work. I nodded. I did not push. But I drove home that evening with a weight on my chest that did not lift when I walked through my front door. The months that followed brought more of the same. Small things. Grace looking thinner when I saw her. Grace being distracted on our Sunday calls. Grace canceling 2 planned visits in a row with reasons that were perfectly reasonable but somehow felt hollow. And Kevin. Kevin was always pleasant when I saw him. Always polished. Always quick with a smile and a firm handshake and a smooth explanation for everything. I started to distrust smooth explanations. It was around this time that the business trips began. My work? I ran a small import consultancy, required occasional travel, sometimes for 2 or 3 weeks at a stretch. I had done this for years. But now, every time I packed a bag, I left with a feeling I had not had before. I left with the feeling that I should not go. I pushed it aside. I told myself Grace was a grown woman, a qualified nurse, a capable, intelligent adult who would ask for help if she needed it. I got on the planes. I did my work. I called on Sundays. And then came the trip I cut short. The trip that ended with Mrs. Okafor's face going still at her gate. The trip that ended with me running. The hospital was 20 minutes from the house. It felt like 2 hours. I sat in the back of the taxi and I held my hands together in my lap and I talked to Ellen inside my head the way I had learned to do in the hard years after she was gone. I said, "Ellen, please. Whatever this is, please let her be all right." I did not know yet what I was walking into. The nurse at the ICU reception recognized me from visiting Grace at the hospital before. She stood up when she saw me come through the doors, and her expression confirmed every fear that had been building in my chest since Mrs. Okafor's gate. She said, "Mr. Thomas." "She's stable." But it was very serious. I said, "What happened?" There was a pause that lasted just slightly too long. She said, "The doctor will speak with you." "But sir, are you aware that Grace has been here for 3 days?" 3 days. My daughter had been in the ICU for 3 days, and I had not known. I had been on a business trip, and nobody had called me. Not the hospital. I understood that. Grace was a married adult, and Kevin was her next of kin. But Kevin. Kevin had not called me. Kevin had known my daughter was fighting for her life in an intensive care unit for 3 full days, and he had not picked up a phone. I stood at the reception desk, and I kept my face very still. I said, "Where is her husband?" The nurse said, carefully, "He was here yesterday. He hasn't come in today yet." I walked to Grace's room. She was sleeping when I came in. She was connected to monitors, a drip running into her arm, her face pale in a way that made her look younger than she was. She looked like the 15-year-old girl I had held together after we lost her mother. Small, fragile in a way she never usually was. If this story is touching your heart, take 1 second right now and hit the like button. It helps more people find stories like this one. And if you know someone going through something difficult right now, share this with them. Sometimes a story is exactly what someone needs to hear. I sat down beside her bed and I took her hand. I did not speak. I just sat there and held her hand and breathed. After a while, she stirred. Her eyes opened slowly. It took a moment for them to focus. And then she saw me. Her face did something that broke me completely open. She started to cry. Not dramatic crying. Not loud. Just quiet. Exhausted tears running down the side of her face. And she said, barely above a whisper, "Dad, you came." I said, "I'm here. I'm right here." She said, "I didn't want to worry you." I said, "Grace, tell me what happened." And she did. Slowly, in pieces, between the tiredness and the medication and the emotion of it all. She told me that she had collapsed at home 5 days ago, that she had been unwell for weeks, exhaustion, dizziness, symptoms she had been pushing through because Kevin had told her she was exaggerating. That the morning she collapsed, Kevin had called the ambulance but then left for work. That he had visited once in 3 days. That he had not called her father because he said, and these words stayed with me, because he said he didn't want to make a big deal of it. My daughter, in the ICU, and he did not want to make a big deal of it. I sat with that quietly for a long time. Then I asked her the question I had been holding back for over a year. I said, "Grace, how long has it been like this?" She was quiet for a moment. Then she said, "A while, Dad. It's been a while." Over the next 2 days, I learned more. I learned that Kevin's polish had a hollow center. That behind the smooth words and the firm handshakes, he had spent their marriage making Grace feel small. Not with raised voices, nothing so obvious. But with dismissal, with indifference. with a particular kind of coldness that does not leave visible marks, but leaves marks nonetheless. I learned that Grace had been covering for him in our Sunday calls because she was ashamed, not of herself, but of the situation. She did not want me to worry. She did not want me to think she had made a mistake. She had her mother's instinct to protect the people she loved, even when she was the one who needed protecting. I learned that the tiredness and the weight loss I had noticed were not just long weeks at work. She had been worn down, quietly, steadily worn down by a life that did not feel safe enough to be honest in. When Kevin finally came to the hospital on the afternoon of my second day there, he walked into the room and stopped when he saw me. The polish was still there. The smile came. He said, "Thomas, I didn't know you were back." I stood up from my chair. I did not raise my voice. I want to be clear about that. I am not a man who shouts. My father never taught me that shouting solved things, and 30 years of living have not changed that lesson. But I looked at Kevin very steadily, and I said, "My daughter has been in this room for 4 days. You have been here once. You did not call me, and I would like you to think very carefully about what you say next." He opened his mouth. Then he closed it, and the polish, just for a moment, cracked. Grace came home after 9 days in the hospital. She did not go home to the house she shared with Kevin. She came home to mine. That was her choice, not mine. I want to be clear about that too. I did not push or pressure or suggest. I simply told her that her room was exactly as she had left it and that she was welcome for as long as she needed. She thought about it for half a day and then she nodded and said, "Okay, Dad, just for a while." That while turned into something more permanent, eventually. But we did not know that yet. Those first weeks were quiet. Grace slept a great deal, which the doctors said was expected. I cooked simple meals and left them outside her door when she was resting. I did not ask questions. I did not push for details or decisions. I just made sure she knew that the house was steady and warm and that nothing was required of her except to heal. Slowly, she began to come downstairs for longer. We started sitting at the kitchen table together in the mornings. Just coffee and quiet at first, then a few words, then longer conversations. The kind we had not had in over a year. Real ones, honest ones, where she did not have to be careful about what she said. She told me more, in pieces, over those weeks. About the marriage, about the slow erosion of it, about the way Kevin had made her feel like her feelings were always slightly too large, always slightly inconvenient. She told me about times she had nearly called me and then stopped herself, about the distance she had built, not to shut me out, but to protect herself from having to say out loud what she already knew. I listened to all of it. I did not say I knew it, because what good would that do? I did not say I never trusted him, because she did not need my hindsight. She needed my presence. I just listened, and when she was finished I said, "Grace, none of this was your fault. Not one piece of it." She cried then, really cried, the way she had not let herself in the hospital. And I sat with her and let it run its course the way my own father had once sat with me and let me grieve without trying to fix it. There is a time for fixing, and there is a time for simply being there. Kevin and I spoke once more, a few weeks later, briefly, at the door of my house. He wanted to see Grace. He had things he wanted to say, he told me. Grace had already told me she was not ready for that conversation. So I told him that clearly, without hostility, without satisfaction. I said, "When she is ready, she will reach out. Until then, please respect her space." He looked at me for a moment. Then he nodded once and walked back to his car. I watched him go. I felt no victory in it, no satisfaction, just a quiet, tired relief. The legal process took several months. I will not walk through all of it because that is not the heart of this story. What I will say is that Grace handled it with the same quiet dignity she handled everything. She was sad, sometimes deeply so, but she was not broken. She had her mother's resilience underneath everything, and watching it come back to the surface, slowly and steadily, was one of the most moving things I have ever witnessed. She went back to nursing 6 months after coming home. Her first shift back, I made her breakfast and I walked her to the door and she turned around and hugged me tightly and said, "Thank you, Dad, for coming home when you did." I said, "I will always come home, Grace." She smiled, and it was her real smile, the one that had been missing for so long, and she went to work. I stood on the front step and I watched her go, the way I had watched her go on her very first shift in her very first uniform years before. And this time I did not go inside quickly enough. The tears came before I made it through the door. I did not mind. I want to sit with you here for a moment before we close. I want to talk about that feeling. The one I had when I decided to get on an early flight. The one I could not name, but could not ignore. The pull in my chest that said, "Go home. Go now, do not wait." I have thought about it many times since. I think that feeling is what happens when you have loved someone long enough and deeply enough that some part of you is always quietly listening for them. Even across distance. Even across silence. Even when they are doing everything in their power to make sure you do not worry. Grace was trying to protect me. She had been trying to protect me the whole time. That is the kind of person she is. The kind who keeps her pain quiet so that the people she loves can sleep at night. But here is what I have learned, and what I hope stays with you today. The people who love us quietly are not always the people who need the least from us. Sometimes they are the people who need the most and who will never ask for it. And our job, as the people who love them back, is to pay attention. Not with suspicion, not with pressure, just with open, patient attention. Notice when the calls get shorter. Notice when the name stops being mentioned. Notice when the eyes go somewhere far away in the middle of a conversation. Those are not small things. Those are someone telling you something in the only language they feel safe enough to use. I almost missed it. I came very close to missing it. I think about that sometimes, late at night. But I did not miss it. I got on the plane. I came home. And my daughter was there waiting, in a hospital room, holding on. Grace is doing well now. Better than well. She moved into her own apartment last year. A small, bright place that she has made entirely her own. She has good friends, work she loves, and a laugh that has come all the way back. She calls me every Sunday, sometimes twice. And sometimes, when we are sitting at the kitchen table on a slow morning, she will look at me over her cup and say nothing at all. Just look and smile. And I know what that means. It means thank you. It means I'm all right. It means I'm still here. And every single time, it is enough. If this story moved you today, please share it with someone who might need to hear it. And if you know someone who has been carrying something quietly, reach out to them. Just reach out. You may never know how much it matters. Drop a comment and let us know where you are watching from. And if you are new here, welcome. Subscribe and stay. There are more stories where this one came from. Until next time, hold your people close. And always, always pay attention.